difficult to understand, because what he sees are most uncommon things. He doesn't like to talk of them.
What if your dreams are more real than your waking life? Carl Gustav Jung, a name now etched in the pillars of psychology, was far more than a scientist of the mind. He was a wanderer in the psychic wilderness, a man who dared to listen to the murmurs of his inner world while the rest of science looked away. To many, his visions seemed like madness. To Jung, they were messages, symbols erupting from the depths of the soul, insisting to be understood. As the 20th century unfolded, Jung quietly birthed a revolution. While others dissected behavior, Jung searched for meaning. He didn't simply ask, "Why do we suffer?" He asked, "What is the soul trying to say through that suffering?" In a world obsessed with facts and functions, Jung opened the door to mystery. He walked between worlds, between Freud and the mystics, between science and soul, between shadow and light. And in doing so, he redefined not just psychology, but the very story of what it means to be human. Jung emerged in a fractured age. The 19th century had torn God from the heavens. The Enlightenment had crowned reason as king, and yet beneath its throne, the human soul wept quietly. Science could split atoms, but it could not mend a broken spirit. By the early 20th century, Europe was spiraling into chaos. 2 world wars carved psychological scars into the collective psyche. The old myths had died. Religion had become hollow ritual. Industrialization dehumanized life into gears and ledgers. Jung saw it clearly. Modern man was suffering not just from trauma, but from meaninglessness. He called it the spiritual problem of the modern individual. To heal this, he didn't look forward, but backward, to the myths, symbols, and sacred stories that once nourished the human soul. He believed that without a myth to live by, modern humans wander aimlessly, trapped in a labyrinth of noise with no thread to guide them home. Jung's psychology wasn't born in an ivory tower. It was forged in the ruins of a broken world. Map for the lost, a whisper of hope in an age of despair. After his break with Freud, Jung faced a psychic crisis. For years, he had been Freud's chosen heir. But when he challenged Freud's materialist dogma, he found himself exiled, alone with a mind that had begun to unravel. Jung did not retreat. Instead, he turned inward. He entered what he called his confrontation with the unconscious, surrendering to visions, dreams, and inner dialogues that surged from the depths. He documented these experiences in a secret journal, the Red Book. It was not a diary. It was scripture channeled from the psyche. Dragons, gods, strange figures of light and shadow populated its pages. Jung wasn't hallucinating. He was engaging in a practice he would later call active imagination, a conscious journey into the mythic dimension of the unconscious. Through this, Jung discovered that the psyche is not a random collection of instincts and memories, but a living, symbolic cosmos. Dreams weren't just mental garbage. They were messages from the self, spoken in the forgotten language of symbol. This descent didn't destroy Jung. It transformed him, and it taught him that the only way out of the darkness is through it. From the depths of his visions emerged a revelation. The human mind is not an isolated island. Beneath our personal experiences lies a shared psychic inheritance. Jung called it the collective unconscious. It is here that the archetypes live. These are not just metaphors. They are psychic organs, primordial forms that shape our behavior, our stories, our gods. The hero, the shadow, the anima, the wise old. Man, you have met them in myths, religions, and your own dreams. Why do cultures across time depict the same themes? Why do myths echo each other across oceans and centuries? Because these figures live within us. The archetypes aren't fixed roles. They are energies, forces that move through the human story. They animate our decisions, haunt our nightmares, and call us toward destiny. To Jung, understanding archetypes was not a curiosity. It was essential to becoming whole. He believed that when you recognize the archetype playing out in your life, you begin to wake up from the dream. You realize You are not just living a life, you are living a myth. I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become, Jung wrote. But first, one must confront what has been denied. Enter the shadow. The shadow is everything you refuse to see in yourself. It is anger repressed, fears ignored, desires shamed. It is what you project onto others, what you condemn, what you fear. But it is not evil. It is power unintegrated. To reject the shadow is to live in half-light. To embrace it is to reclaim your fullness. Jung believed that much of human evil comes not from malice, but from unconsciousness, from being possessed by shadow elements we refuse to own. He challenged us to dive into our own darkness, to speak with it, to dance with it. Only then can it become your ally, not your saboteur. The shadow is not the enemy. It is the doorway. Jung's greatest gift was a map, not just of the mind, but of the soul's journey. He called it individuation, the process by which a person becomes whole. This is not self-improvement. This is self-realization. It is the union of opposites, light and dark, masculine and feminine, ego and self. Jung drew heavily from alchemy, not as science, but as symbolic language. Just as base metals are transmuted into gold, so too must the fragmented self be transformed into unity. Every trial, every dream, every piece of suffering becomes raw material for the great work. To individuate is to become who you truly are. Not a mask, not a role, but a living embodiment of your inner truth. It is the sacred labor of a lifetime. Despite his depth, Jung was often dismissed. Too spiritual for science, too scientific for religion. But time is circling back. Today, neuroscientists explore dreams. Mystics speak of integration. Quantum physicists echo his notions of synchronicity. Indigenous healers speak in the symbols Jung described. And modern therapy, once rooted in behaviorism, now returns to story, to myth, to meaning. The world is beginning to understand what Jung knew all along. The soul is real. His Red Book was hidden for decades, considered too strange for publication. But now it inspires a new generation. Because the age of certainty is fading, and the hunger for depth is returning, Jung is no longer a whisper in psychology's margins. He is the storm on its horizon. Jung left us with a question. What myth are you living? Most people cannot answer, and yet without that answer we drift, we suffer, we repeat. Jung's work was never about escape. It was about encounter, to meet the self, to know the archetypes stirring in your blood, to name the shadow, to walk the path not as a role, but as a soul. You are not just living a life, you are living a myth. And if you listen closely, your dreams are trying to tell you what it is. So ask yourself, who am I beneath the noise? What symbols haunt my sleep? What is the unconscious trying to show me? Because until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. What if the structure of your mind wasn't born in your brain, but inherited from the myths of ancient civilizations? Carl Jung didn't just study psychology. He uncovered a dimension of reality that had been buried under centuries of dogma, science, and forgetfulness. He wasn't always a mystic. He began as a rising star in the field of psychiatry, a close ally of Sigmund Freud. But where Freud saw the mind as a battlefield of suppressed desire, Jung sensed something far older and deeper. Their partnership crumbled, and Jung was left to wander, not just professionally, but spiritually. Alone, he turned inward. What he discovered wasn't a void, but a world. He realized that the psyche was not a blank slate. It wasn't just shaped by culture, upbringing, or trauma. There were structures within us, patterns older than memory, stories that repeated themselves through generations, dreams, and myths. Who was Carl Jung? Not merely a man of science, but a cartographer of the soul. Across the ancient world, from the temples of Egypt to the forests of the Norsemen, From Hindu scriptures to Navajo legends, certain characters, images, and stories reappear. The wise old man, the nurturing mother, the devouring serpent, the noble hero. Why do cultures separated by oceans and time all share the same symbols? Jung asked this question and arrived at a startling conclusion. These aren't cultural coincidences.